So basically what I wanted to talk about the trends, about technologies, about all of the society and how it influences all of us. Well, basically what is going to change? Well, a lot of things have been obvious quite a long time ago. Before the crisis, all of the forecasts about this crisis have been made, and we have discussed at the previous forums here in UNIT.City that the processes are manageable, the trends are manageable, and we're already living in this transition that the basics and the social practices that the best social practices are the new social practices that are around us. And of course, we would like to paint the future as if, like that, with nice pictures, with nice airplanes, with solar panels, using the electricity, the engines. It would really be good if if the future would be technologized. But maybe the future is like that. Maybe the future is just about the social impact, about influencers, about setting up the trends through very simple actions. Maybe future is way too open, and society way too open, and too manageable society. Or maybe the future is the artificial intelligence that even got into the service sectors that we wanted to preserve for people. Understanding that the people are already losing out the competition to the artificial intelligence and the productivity of their work. The only thing that is left for us is communication, creation, creativity, art, education. So basically, not making something, but creating ideas. And I think that this is the main starting point for the further on discussion of the future in 2025, 2035. The technologies are not going to change radically. Most of the technologies are quite clear, but it's unclear what's going to happen with people. We know the main movement trajectory in analyzing DNA, in predictive medicine, in autonomous transportation, in robotics, in the cybernetic forecast of the future, but it's not clear about what's going to happen to people, whether they're going to migrate to the Wall-E cartoon images or something else is going to happen to people, whether people are going to be working through their digital copies, whether we're going to start living in virtual space, whether the retail is going to migrate to the digital retail, and this is the dynamics that we can see in the overall in e-commerce for the next 5 years, whether our world is going to become more digitalized or we will try to get out of it, whether our society is going to change into the social media, into the control media, whether our space is going to be turned into the social media spaces of e-commerce or something else. I don't think that this is going to be the main trend. The main challenge for humankind for the next 10 years is going to be this: our readiness, and this is the overall level, this is our readiness to basically forget about work for the gamification. Gamification, that games that would substitute real life, games that substitute work, games that substitute the real communication. This is the way the game dev looks like. This is Ukraine has 20% at this very moment in the game dev. And if this trajectory that we have seen together with the Singularity University experts and other communities of cyber sports are trying to build up, this trajectory, starting from 2025, is going to start to develop exponentially, and out of the 20 billion is going to be $2 trillion up to the end of 2030. If we will preserve our 20% of the game dev market that we have now, we will triple our GDP just with this sector. Maybe we should have this idea delivered to the US by the president. But there is another moment that finally we overall have to consider as well. This is the issues of ecology and environment, and there's no answer for us what to do with the global climate change. Right now, it really looks like, ironically, 4th of September, we're all freezing here. People are almost sitting in fur overcoats. I'm dressed like that just because we have a hot floor here. Okay, so do we actually already trapped by William Nordhaus's forecast that up till 2030 the sea will be by woman's side, or can we still get out of it? Of course, there are some answers for the humanity. There are a lot of answers for the humanity. One of the answers is also hidden here, the change of the food culture. In the next 30 years, we will have to find the most important decision in our life, how to provide food for additional 2 billion people, and we're going to have less emotions in food, more proteins in food. We're going to find some additional feeds for people. And another idea is the constant substitution, the animal proteins to the plant proteins. Basically, we are forecasting the dynamics of the active proteins in the US. We will see the breakdown in 2025. When up to 15 to 20%, this market will grow up till 80% up till next 10 years. The alternative proteins, it's about plant-based protein, insect-based protein, and we already know that for a couple of years we have been laughing about that in different comments, but now we have to face it. The cow can give 14 grams of greens to give one gram of protein, but the crickets, they can do that for 2 grams of greens up till 1 grain of protein. So we will have to with crickets. Okay, are you ready for that? Okay, we have all of the futurologists here. Okay, Rostislav, I know that you're always ready for this kind of the coolest and big challenges. The alternative proteins, they're also based on plant and bio meat, is already presented for 2 years in Ukraine. And if they do not grow, that doesn't mean that the future will never come. It just means that the future is dispersed unequally. The breakthrough is going to happen at around 2025. On the other hand, another obvious moment of the future is the full rethinking of the financial system, because you never know about what the money mean in the real world. You know, for me as a PhD in economy, it's really hard to acknowledge that, but now we are facing the end of capitalism in a way that we know it. Neo-capitalism is about next 5 years of searching for the next model. What to do with this money? The one that we cannot evaluate our reality no more. Boston Dynamics has been sold with $1.1 billion. Slack has been sold by $27 billion. How is that possible? But it's not the freakiest thing that we should expect. And that's not the freakiest thing that should we expect. There's a funny thing, nice thing. The most freakiest thing is this. 2 years ago, we have found the radical outbreak among Ukrainians. Uh, After Ukrainians, we had this breakdown in Poland, and then in France, then in Netherlands, and now we see that wave going all around the world. If, for example, balanced rationalists were the biggest part of the society up till 2019, then starting from 2019, we have become radical or moderate innovators. We have changed our behavior models, and that is why we have the craft breakthrough. That is why the ideas of loyalty. That is why the loyal marks are also dying out. That is why we have to rethink the business model. This is something that is happening. That is one of the reasons and one of the base grounds to the neo-capitalism, when the rent as a resource rent is changed by the other rent. The rent of trust, of experience, of interest, of attention, of relations. A different margin is different economy. It's a different economical basis and foundation, and the different senses that you set out into this economy. The change of behavior is the key reason for the radical change of economical models. If we will sum everything up, and if we will take up to those meta trends that we should see up till 2025, we haven't changed our forecast significantly. We see there's 13 points that I'm going to outline for all of you. First of all, the global growth of consumption and of consuming. So the change of consumption to the growth of consumption still. The main trend of change is the food goods of demand. So whatever you want on demand, whatever is turned as a service, everything as a service. Out to all of it, we also have the direct-to-customer technology, logistic technologies, but most of all, the people should have the foods, their clothes, or whatever they want, or even the feed for their pets, when they have this need at this very moment. Out of this, the change of retail in the next 5 years, the change of logistics in the next 5 years, the storage and production systems overall. The production systems are going to migrate from technology of mass production from China to the localized production of the mass personalized production. And this is the greatest opportunity for Ukraine. Will we use it or not? This is the question. And this is the second moment that we have to deal with, and the second moment that we should have discussed in the US. Another forecast point is the cyberocracy. So cyberocracy and the cyberocracy system, the ecosystems that will eat out the state. Our existence in ecosystem is much more important than the physical citizenship up till 2030. The next point, the third, the demonetization that has already taken down lots of sectors, and I will talk about that later. Internet of Things, there's 3-4 trillions of sensors that will collect information about us. This is already something going to happen in 2025. And this gives us the opportunity to introduce 5G furthermore and faster. The fifth point, it's not just about the interfaces between people and machines, but overall cybernetic broadening of people's senses, installation of gadgets and chips under the skin or into the brain. Those are the realities not of the future, those are realities that we're currently living in. That doesn't really mean whether you have aura on your hand or it's been implemented under your skin. Under the skin, by the way, it's much more comfortable because, like, you're always taking this outside to wash your hands, and I'm losing it all the time. So yes, of course, that's out of it. Who's going to install some chips inside of yourself? Okay, no, that's not too many people. You were ready to eat crickets. Crickets are going to happen later. Crickets are going to happen like in 2028, and the chips are going to be happening in a couple of years ago. But I think you're already vaccinated, aren't you? Okay. Then again, the personification of logistics of moving. Right now, we have a lot of things about scooters. We understand that the personal transportation of the future is quite different than scooters. The girls are not riding together and they're not falling outside by falling on the street. Less traumatic, more safety. But still, the scooters, electric scooters, are given to us just for us to try out the new technologies of movement. If you are against scooters, you're against the future, and the future will call back on you. Next, the robotics. Again, that's quite clear. The AI as service. This is the trend that has started from 2019. The AI has already been democratized. The artificial intelligence is free of charge. Deep machine learning is free of charge. The professionals that can do, they are more expensive and expensive. I think that you know that the professionals in Ukraine are already paid even higher than in Europe. Considering the deficiency of staff there as well, people in Philippines cost 5 times less, and they know English slightly better. So with the help of the different technologies of remote technologies, we will start to be multicultural soon. The 10th trend that is the most interesting for me right now, because Ukraine can play one of the key roles in that as well, is the changing of the medical sector as well. The predictive medicine, distant remote medicine, the medicine that is built on a completely different principles. 80% of the investment that currently being provided to the healthcare sector, it's not about pharmacology, not about the drug production, but this is basically the change approach to healthcare at all. So basically, you're not waiting while you're going to die because of heart attack, even though the Apple Watch does it. It gives you the signal if something is wrong with you. But all of the story is being made just to start using the predictive healthcare models. Can we do that? Yes, we can do that. There's a lot of the healthcare issues that can be forecasted. For example, the Alzheimer or Parkinson disease can be forecasted a couple of years before they emerge. Then, the new technologies that migrate to the other things. Yes, energy is being demoted, decapitalized, but the technology of the transmission of the electricity is going to be very actively developed. Yes, here it's happening. We have the DTAC Academy, and DTAC is happening here. We have it in Vinnytsia near the NASA plant and the new technology and plants. I think that they are going to be presenting soon what they have been working on. Yes, those are those technologies that Ukraine should not wait and lag behind as well. We shouldn't wait for Europe in this case. But because we have the energy infrastructure that has already been outdated and we have to change our energy infrastructure, we shouldn't now try to follow up, but we can move in a completely other way. We can do that right now. what are the trends for the businesses? The key trends for the businesses are, first of all, we're speaking about the adaptivity, the opportunity to step outside of the case and benchmarking methodologies to get to the models of constant change, the personification of businesses, moving out of the outdated marketing to start working with the personalized marketing, the gamification. This is something that right now sounds like very strange thing and something very unclear, but if you have already faced millennials in your work, then you understand that the old motivation system do not work there at all. People are not at their job position, and you call them and they kind of got fired, but they didn't feel like they should inform you. You tell them that you can be a senior master in 3 years, and you see these glass eyes, and the people do not understand this perspective. They want to have the remuneration now. If it doesn't happen now, then they have no motivation to work. The changes of technologies, but still it will be all about people. It all will be human oriented. This is something that we're going to face for the next 5 years. Person inside of the ecosystem, inside of the businesses, and even if we speak about the digital systems, we are getting to the human-centered models. With the help of the personalization, they will give us the opportunity here and now, on demand, what is needed for each specific person, not to the abstract segment, but to this very person in this very specific situation. Then again, the values are important. The trust is restored, even though it seems like, we never have believed in trust. We never have cherished it, not on the highest management, not among the members of the parliament. The trust doesn't work. By the way, we're going to have the next presentation and we're going to talk about that later. But still, right now, the business, it has restored the trust to brands. Loyalty dies off, but the trust and interest are being restored. Thus, everything that is considering the reputation management is the trend of the next decade. What's going on in the world? In Ukraine that has been kissed by the gods, there's a lot of good opportunities awaits because the developing countries, they grow with unbelievable scale. India is already #1 in population, and if we even consider that a bad thing, then India becomes the country with the second best GDP up till 2040. Africa grows up till 1.5 billion population, and Ukraine becomes the associated member of African Union. So basically, those are the markets that are good for us. The new economical strategy and the new strategies, they see that, they show that clearly. And of course, the growth of population will peak in 1988, the peak of growth, and we can see that we're getting into the logarithmic growth. We already had the break point, so that is why they can have the third child in China. Up till 2040, India stops at growth, and we will see that it will be the slowdowns of the growth. Up till 2050, we're going to have less than 10 billion people, and that will be more or less sustainable number of population up till the end of the century. But there are other challenges that are very interesting for us. The economical trends, first of all, connected to the overall amount of the free money and increase of the overall global debt. That's already more than 30% of the GDP. And this also gives us the opportunity to rethink the essence of money. 400 million of people, they work in the countries where they do not reside, where they're not the citizens of. And up till 2050, we believe it's going to be 1.5 billion people. We have 1.5 billion people in the world who will be working outside of the country of their citizenship. And half of that will be about the remote work. So that's a very interesting trend still, a very interesting change. Then again, another opportunity for Ukraine as well. This is the overall synthesis between digital and the traditional industries. The development of the shared economy, the so-called sharing economy, the decapitalization and so basically technologies of the transmission of information, the storage information, education, energy, that's all of that is going to be mostly demonetized. And it will need a new financial model, but that's not the most important thing still. The most important thing in the new financial models is about two important things: digitalization and the change of demography. Starting with that digitalization, while preparing the national economic strategy that has been approved and is now implemented by the Cabinet of Ministry, we have modeled at least 200 scenarios for the development of Ukrainian economy, just trying to find what can be our breakthrough sector to get out of this organic script where we have the twice increase of GDP up to the breakthrough scenario where we can grow by 3 or by 4 times. And it turns out that the key opportunities for Ukraine are dubious. So I doubled. So first of all, integration or intermarrying or the 3C integration with Poland or the other countries of the Central Europe, integration in logistical or economical union, but the better things are the green lines altogether, up plus 40% of GDP is digitalization of economy. The total digitalization of all of the processes in the state, starting from this different type of metallurgical or chemistry sector up to transport and infrastructure. But another important thing for the new financial system and Ukrainian financial system is demography. In Ukraine, we have a demographic catastrophe. Unlike all over the world, while the amount of the labor resources grows, in Ukraine, we need plus 2 million labor resources, and we have minus 2 million labor resources starting from next year. Up till 2050, we will see the decrease of population up till 25 million people. But that's not the most ironic, not the biggest challenge. The biggest challenge is here. It's not just about the change of the demographical pyramid, and that has become there already a different figure than the pyramid is, but it's about the change of behavior. All of the economical model of the world is someone invests and saves and other spend. Now, the prolonged lifespan has turned out that we have more people who spend money. The lifespan increases, the quality of life increases, the desire to spend more money increases, but there's not that many people who would invest and think of people. We do not have that many people no more. The birth of children is being decreased. The people who are 20, 50, 30 years, we don't have them enough. But the next challenge is not about demography. The next, not with the lifespan, not with, I don't know, the better requirements for the better life quality, but with other trend, with this, with the change of the behavior of the new generations. They have not saving no more. They're not investing anymore. The behavior patterns of millennials is about joy. It's about having bliss. It's about enjoying themselves here and now. Not thinking with longer horizons. Do you think globally, geographically, but not globally in the time span? Very short-term mind frame. But the good thing about this phasic shift that has started in 2016, it happened when we have seen this small detail. It's not about them becoming different. It's not about millennials, and it's not about this generation theory because it's not the behavior of some certain age. It's about the behavior of people who have read the very same article. It's the behavior of the people who have understood that they would like to use some kind of a life model. It's about us. That's not about age. It's about the thinking model and behavior model. So that is why we do not call millennials that they are responsible for this global change. It's all about us. It's all about us who's going Saturday morning to some kind of futurologistic congresses when it's cold, when it's raining, I don't know, coming from Lviv and other places. So it's all about us. We have changed our behavior models. We are responsible that we live in the gamified world. It's us that's about changing our mind frame and our thinking horizon. We are responsible that the debt level is higher in the world. Thus, we are responsible for the new money that we need. What kind of money that would be? That is the question that we have to answer to ourselves in the next 5 years. I have the answer to this question, and the answer is as follows. The new money are going to be based not on resources. The new money are going to be based on ideas, on talents, on opportunities, and on reputation. And those next 5 years to find what is going to be the new equivalent of relations. And we have to do that as fast as possible because soon 2030, 2035 are going to happen and we are going to switch from neo-capitalism to post-capitalism. And we're going to be living in the world, and this is going to be the question for the most of comments after this presentation. So this will be the moment where we will not need money at all because we will start using a different relations model. The exchange model will be used up to until 2025. So the money will lose their functions, whatever functions they have. And this is this very moment when, on one hand, technologies are going to help us to take down the borders between human intellect and artificial intellect. We will not be able to teleport people to Mars, but it's quite sure we're not going to be flying to Mars, because going to 3 months to Mars, we can't take standing in traffic jam for an hour and a half. So no 3 months to Mars. No. The quantum teleportation could be possible from 2025. You can teleport person as a physical shell. It's just about 8 zettabyte of information. With the quantum operations, we'll be able in 2030, 2035, we can then recollect the shell of a person, but we cannot understand how the consciousness problem. We know how we process information, we can recreate neurons, but we cannot make ideas happen in the cells. We don't know how that works. This is the problem of consciousness that's still unsolved. I kind of believe that in the next 10 years we will not resolve the conscious problem. So as people, we will be still seeing something that the artificial intelligence doesn't have. We will have the happiness, depression, and all of the border emotions with one reason. As a physical object, we have fears, we have needs, and needs they're being also turned into interest because of our motives and values, and interests become our goals, actions. The artificial intelligence doesn't have that. You can inspire the interest for the artificial intellect. We can inspire them with goals, and they can only work like that. They do not want to fall in love or to write a poem or to drink some coffee. So they can receive a hint that you can want to do that, and then they will write a new nocturne instead of Chopin, or they will write a poem instead of some of the authors and the poets of the past. Of course, there's other social trend, the digital twins. The digital twins will be based on our desires and our behaviors, but we will not have this like undo or set out to the previously said version. We will not have it in the 2030, 2035. So that is why our physical shell will still be very important for us. That is why for the next 10, 15 years, we have to preserve our planet and ecology on that. We cannot fully get into digital space, and we will not be able to resolve this issue up to this horizon of 10, 15 years. So that is why we'll be fighting for talents. That is why we need people who create ideas. That is why we will need systems, how we will get the talents to Ukraine. Not just the 2 millions of the labor force from Asia and Africa countries. Yes, that's of course because there will be no economical growth for Ukraine. So that is why multiculturalism is important. That is why we should get used to tourists coming from the Middle East, but fighting for talents not only to holding them back, but also for engaging talents. Unfortunately, we're lacking our own talents for us to turn to the country of the product startup, for us to turn out to be the Silicon Valley of Europe. By the way, this is the third thesis that we could have presented at our visit in US with the president. But we have to understand that the culture is going to eat out the strategy even faster than they did before. We have to build up trust, communities, networking faster, much faster. This is another challenge for the next couple of years. The challenges for the next couple of years is the rethinking of the technologization of Ukrainian economy. Yes, we have lost out in each of these sectors. Yes, we haven't used all of this legacy that we have had 30 years ago. So that is why Ukrainian export has lowest level of technology. That is why we're lagging behind those international trends when the technology have become into social practices. That is why we're trying to copy or do something that has already become the practices in the developed world while the technology are already developed. But the most important thing is the future of Ukraine is to work with the technologies that are not social practices in the world. Then we will be able to produce the product startups, and then we will be able to get outside of the raw export. So what are the main three vectors for the survival of Ukraine in the closest horizon? First of all, international trade and integration for the international economical society. So working with the added value, logical and logistics chain. Foreign direct foreign investment, and we're losing out in that. We will need to have at least $15 billion FYI a year. And of course, it's about the productivity. You can have all of the slides in national strategy. I just wanted to hint what is going to be the next challenge for us. The productivity of our labor is lower than in Poland. It's not about the salaries, it's about the productivity, first of all. And, well, basically, just to wrap up, I really would like to say it's not enough for us to build up businesses that would have been innovative, that would have been flexible. We have to change our logic. We have to change the logic for the business models. We'll have to build up businesses that would be adaptive, anti-fragile, would be diverse and dispersed, and would be proactive. And the main task for us is to search for these ideas and to build these ideas into practice. Being adaptive is the most important, and it's not adapting to the conditions, but adaptivity of the higher phase. This is the opportunity to influence the change of the processes. And while still Ukraine as a country, as businesses, will try to adapt to the environment that exists, we will lose out. As soon as we will start managing the change, we'll start winning. This is what I would like to wish to all of us. Your future is about adaptivity and influence. Thank you.
Let's try to talk about global trends after just what we had. So I'm just back from California, and California is burning, right? So if somebody in this room can tell me that climate change is not existing, especially today where we're freezing, well, come on stage, you're welcome. And 18 months of a global pandemic. 18 months. Nobody saw that coming. Well, a few people, but nobody listened to them. You know, at UNIT.City, we have a passion. We have many passions, but we have one passion. We believe that we are building the future. This is what it is. This is what we believe the future should look like. It's about tech. It's about community. It's about building things together. It's about creating things together. Personally, I don't know, but I'm not really willing to go to Mars. Actually, who in the room is willing to move to Mars? 2, 3, Kirill? That's it, right? I like this planet. I decided to work in tech more than 25 years ago because I believe in tech. I believe technology is here to help us change the world for better. But today, I'm wondering, can we trust tech? Can we trust tech to build a better future for all of us, for the 10 billion people who are going to be in this planet? Well, this is what this panel is about. Let's try to find solutions and let's try to find good ideas with my panelists. And first, I would like to call on stage Kira Rudik. Kira, please. Round of applause for Kira. Kira is a member of the Verkhovna Rada, and she's the deputy chair of the Committee on Digital Transformation, and she's also the former CEO of Ring. We share a lot of things in common with Kira. Our passion for tech is definitely one of them. Next, please welcome on stage Chris Burry. Chris Burry is the co-CEO of the US Market Access Center in Silicon Valley, also known as USMAC. And Chris has been in tech for maybe even as long as I've been in tech, right? Probably even longer. That's okay, that's okay. Ilja Laurs is a lecturer, global thinker, the founder and chairman of Nextury Ventures. Ilja is one of those guys that you turn around when you have a good idea and you want to find some maybe money and a way to finance it. David Orlic is the co-founder and CEO of Anyone. David, please. And last but not least, our good friend Alexi Lazarenko, country manager of BlaBlaCar in Ukraine. I have to tell you a secret. I love BlaBlaCar, but there's a reason why. It's because it's one of our French unicorn. So that's so cool. And Ukraine is the second country for BlaBlaCar in terms of markets. So see, we can do stuff together. Okay, guys, let's start, and I will start with you, Kira. Please just introduce yourself and tell us, why do you love tech? Why do you think tech is good for the future after everything we saw?
Good morning, good morning, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure for me to be here today. And I do hope that this really freezing morning will not make our discussion cold. But basically, I have been working and I am working in the two critical directions for us. I have been in the big IT businesses and Dominic has already said about that when the Ring company that has a big offices in Ukraine. They have been sold to Amazon for more than $2 billion. Right now, I'm working in Ukrainian parliament. I have got to Ukrainian politics because I believe that there is change needed into our country. And I see this change through technology. I do believe that one of the ways for us to change the things that are critical for us is technology. So I believe that the problems that can be solved have to be solved through technology. So the changes, the way the state works with the state, how the collaboration between the state and people is being created can be changed through the technology. The corruption can be fight through the technology. That is why I believe in technology.
Chris, why do you believe in technology? And in a few words, what's your take on that?
So I got started in technology. I'm going to date myself, but watching the original Star Trek TV show, and it was just like, oh, this is really cool, really cool stuff. But the reason I've stayed is honestly because as we look around the world, you in the introduction talked about the pandemic and the the fires in California, the climate change and everything. The world faces an incredible set of challenges. In many ways, it's technology and the outcome of those technologies. You look at CO2 emissions are the result of technology, which is the driving force of climate change. It's various innovations that in some degree have gotten us into the mess that we're in. And it's also going to be technology and innovation that if we can get enough people engaged, we can have them go out and help solve all of these different problems. I mean, I look at like the pandemic, the speed with which the vaccines were created was the result of technology. Without that technology and the innovation, the pandemic would have been that much worse. But for me, I like to stay engaged because even though I'm not completely involved in just social impact stuff, I'm always looking and saying, is there technology that we can help, that we can foster, that we can help bring to market that is really going to make a difference in the world?
Cool. Ilya, what's your take on that?
Sure. I think the answer is pretty simple. Everybody wants to live better. And I think technology gives you best ROI on your effort, on your investment to live better. Simple as that.
Okay. I'll take that, right? David.
Why I believe in technology?
Yes.
Well, I believe in technology because in the long run it brings marginal costs down to zero, which theoretically should free us from two things that are very enslaving: labor and ownership. Mm-hmm. So I guess I have no choice but to believe in it. Problem is that the risk of inequality is quite high on our road to that utopia, right?
Alexei, I'm gonna ask you the question in a slightly different way. As many of us on this panel, you're an entrepreneur. You created your own company. You sold it to BlaBlaCar. Do you believe that tech entrepreneurship can save the world? And I'm saying this in a very blunt, open way, because this is a very Silicon Valley way of viewing things. Like Steve Jobs, like, yes, I can change the world, and I'm so. But was it your belief when you started your company?
Добрый день.
Good morning. Good morning. It is a pleasure for me to be here with you as well. Well, yes, I would say that yes, that entrepreneurship is definitely the driver for the technology, and this is what I believe as well. But I would like to slightly allow myself to answer the previous question, why I fundamentally believe in tech. So I would like to say that technology, in my understanding, technology is about a function, the function that comes from our human nature, because we are all taking care about basic needs. We would like to have our basic needs covered. But this is our nature about being inquisitive, about being curious, and technology is a reflection of those processes and those curiosity needs. And entrepreneurship is, of course, something as well that is inside of innovation. This is the basis, the foundation of innovation, in a way, because well, this has been proven by time. The entrepreneurs are the people who are, in the end, bringing the innovation, bringing the technology that can change the world. And BlaBlaCar, and my story is one of those ideas. I was going to my work in my empty car that was 10 years ago, and then I have finally understood that if I will create a platform where drivers and passengers will be able to find one another, they will be able to use the car resources more rational, then that will radically change the landscape of all of the logistics and transportation system. That was a very simple thought that actually made me pursue my friend who was a developer to start the project that we did. And right now, BlaBlaCar has more than 100 million users in 22 countries. It actually saves more than 1.5 million CO2 tons that hasn't been provided to the atmosphere. This is something that Paris produces a year. So the simple ideas in the entrepreneurs' heads, they can be then shown in those big global changes that influence the behavior, influence the environment, influence the humanity.
Well, I will come back to the question as entrepreneurs are here to change the world and talked about and what about government, but we'll come back to this later. First, well, one of the global trend, and that was very well illustrated before, is climate change. I think climate change is not something new. It's something we saw coming for the past 20 years. It was very well documented. I mean, I've been going to TED for years and years and years, more than 15 years now, and that was already conversation we had back then. And we have solutions. BlaBlaCar is one of them. There's many other solutions. But why are we still there? What's happening? Is technology cannot deliver, or is it government who can't deliver, or is it us as human beings? We just keep doing what we used to do: eat steak every night and take our car alone, going to work every day, creating huge traffic jam in Kyiv. What's your take on that? Ilya, do you want to start?
Sure. So, thesis. Technology currently adoption is limited by the people, not by the technology itself. And I always illustrate this by a very simple fact. I know they know it in Ukraine. When you have to report your gas or water, you write, like this little digits on your little piece of paper and then submit somewhere. So once I was doing that a while ago and then realized it's already 5 years since there's a camera on my phone. But I'm still taking those gas, electricity, etc., with the pencil on the paper and then taking them somewhere. So I said, hey, why did it take me, and I consider myself like a technology adopter kind of, why did it take me 5 years to realize I can simply take a photo and then simplify this work? So from there, basically, I realized that if you take any technology, any DVDs, SMS, they actually become big 7-10 years since they are introduced. So I realized, well, it's a human adoption that has specific space. You cannot bypass that. So my take is that whatever great is discovered or made or developed, it will take 7 to 10 years for the mass market to adopt. And actually, there is a classical cycle: early adopters, mass market, and so on and so on. You cannot bypass that, unfortunately.
Okay, Chris?
See, I have perhaps a more simplistic view. It's that it is, you're right about it's the adoption, but it is, for me, it's about people are unwilling to change their behavior. It is about inertia. This is what I've done, this is what I'm always going to do. And, it's also, I hate to say it, but people don't like to be inconvenienced. It's like being able to, have 3 bins in your kitchen where you have the waste, you have the recyclables, and you have the compostables. It requires a little bit more effort to do that, but most people at the beginning, until it becomes sort of a habit, don't, they don't want to do that. We know collectively how to change our behaviors to impact the environment, but it's about generating the collective will and to go from short-term thinking to long-term thinking. I mean, you look at technology. Solar energy has been around forever. Wind has been around forever. And, if people were willing to pay just a tiny bit more, you could change the economics. We collectively have to decide whether or not we will use the technology tools available to solve the problem.
David, what do you think? I mean, are human really bad?
I think we're ill-equipped for long-term thinking on an individual basis. So if anything, we should have institutions that do the long-term thinking for us. And I guess that's a key issue that, we're always complaining about quarterly capitalist economics, but we have electoral politics that move in very short cycles. And it's tricky to deliver that systemic change at scale, right? So I often turn away from looking at the individual or even the collective and look at what work can be done from the institutions. That's my point of view. Maybe we could ask the politician in the room.
Well, yes, Kira.
Yeah, so for the sake of us being able to talk to each other, I'm switching to English. So I agree with the previous speakers. First, that all the climate-related changes and adapting to them and even believing in them takes a long time. And here, where the tech could give us the predictions on what would happen if we wouldn't change our behavior. And this, I would think, would be the main and the key role of tech in climate change. Saying, guys, we are already past this red line of where we should have started thinking about the climate change and our consumption patterns. Second is what I agree with is that really the electoral cycles are fairly short comparing to the changes and to the long-term strategies that need to be adapted. And all the green initiatives, they usually not that popular, especially for the countries that really need these green initiatives, especially for the countries that need to develop fast and they see their development not in the green technologies, but rather in the fast, in creating new production cycles, etc., etc. So what tech could help us with now? So the first part is obviously transforming all the production lines and cycles to the more ecological ones. Second, by cultural connecting all the people and creating new cultural patterns, changing this general idea of how we should live and how we should produce sustainable way of living for everybody in the world. And here, when we are all closely connected, the cultural trends could rise faster. And the third is better and actively predict not only the climate changes that we need to fix, but rather climate changes that will happen on separate points, like predicting the hurricanes. This is what we see right now, what's happening in states. Predicting the weather changes that are right now in the different parts of the world where people would see and really believe in that the change is inimitable.
Alexi, your company is very involved in this. This is kind of, you're on a mission, and BlaBlaCar has been on a mission for this from the very beginning when it started in France. But why is change so slow, according to you? Why does it take so long? Why so many of us drove our car this morning alone to come to UNIT.City? and now we have a full parking.
На самом деле, да, очень хорошо.
Well, basically, that's a good question, and most of all of our speakers has given a very good answer, in my opinion, to this question. I do agree that people are very inertious, and you know it's really hard to change habits. The old habits die hard, and I do believe that technologies that bring us the shared services or carpooling services, it's about rational use. But it's really hard to influence people with rational arguments. You cannot reach people with reasonable, rational arguments. You cannot at least influence or persuade the mass population because those arguments, they do not trigger strong emotions when they're reasonable arguments. The habits that can be easily changed, I don't know, with hormones or like dopamine or adrenaline that can be changed or through either very stressful or very positive situations. But right now, while we're still in this phase of, let us say, non-critical for the most of the people, at least as it exists in the understanding of all of the people, the environmental catastrophe is not critical. And people still do not feel it emotionally. They still consider the reasonable arguments. It is really hard for us to shift these reasonable arguments into the habits, into your everyday behaviors, because you don't have the fear, you don't have urgency, you don't have dopamine that will actually stimulate you not to use your car alone, but to use BlaBlaCar because it gains some social effect, but it doesn't give you this kind of dopamine attack that you will have while you're playing a computer game. I do believe that sooner or later, you know, most of the people, they have already seen on their TV screens how the fires are burning, how the climate is changing dramatically. This is something that really brings the fear. And I believe that this fear is going to be the biggest engine, the biggest driver to adopt those changes and to adopt the green technology. Because you have now the fear coming, you have the urgency coming. But unfortunately, the people are built that way that without any kind of strong triggers, you will not change your habits.
Question for you guys, actually. If, as a CEO of UNIT.City, tomorrow I decide to close every parking in UNIT.City, say, well, you have a car, too bad, you cannot access UNIT.City. Do you think that that would be a good solution or a bad solution? Should I close the parking? See, nobody wants to close this parking. Everybody wants to come to UNIT.City with their own cars. So, guys, it's great. I love what you're saying. It just doesn't work. They don't change. We don't change. I want to come to with my car. Chris, how do we change us?
So this is where I think innovation comes into play, because the reality is that if you create solutions that are easier and cheaper than the current alternative and are environmentally conscious, environmentally friendly, and so forth. You just look at like the cost of solar. 10 years ago, the only way you could afford solar was if you were rich and you just wanted to be like, oh, look, I'm cool, I have solar, or you had massive government subsidies. But the cost of solar panels has come down through innovation so dramatically that now there are economic incentives that say, wow, it's cheaper to it's cheaper to use solar than it is to use these other alternatives. One of the other speakers talked about, in the technology space, the cost tends to sort of come to zero. It's through innovation that we can get ourselves to the point where, the economic incentives for the behavioral change align with the changes that we need in order to protect the climate of the planet.
But yeah, please, Ilya.
Yeah, I have maybe 2 points. So I did like a lot the comment that even for any rational change, people need emotional incentive. And I would appeal to the very simple thing which we consider today as a granted, is basically cleaning your teeth every morning. And did you know that the toothpaste was coming to the market for actually almost 100 years, and it did not work because it wasn't tasteful. It was very good for your health, it was cleaning your teeth, but it wasn't tasteful, so it wouldn't stick. And then some genius in the US at the 30s came up with the idea it should taste mint. So it gives you a sense of clean. It's actually medically same clean as before with soda, but you felt it's clean, and suddenly your phone, the change happens dramatically. So the second point is I did watch from very close the mobile revolution that happened like 10 years ago. And it wasn't until Apple that really mobile apps became big, because probably many people remember how difficult it was to like make a Java application configuration, etc. on the phone. Like Nokia were just like impossible. And then Apple comes and makes it like a one click. And then everybody has apps. There is an apps for everything. So the change happens overnight. So I would definitely highlight 2 points that if any change, however rational, however economic it is, however much makes sense, unless you make it like super, super, super simple, like a click of a button, and unless you do attach some kind of emotional component to that, unfortunately the change doesn't happen fast.
So we need emotion. But, okay. 10 years ago, I didn't knew I needed to spend 5 hours, 6 hours on my phone every day, watching YouTube and being on Facebook. And today I do. Doesn't help, doesn't do anything for climate change. So what basically you're saying is what the Facebook of the world are doing to capture my attention, maybe the non-Facebook of the world who are working on climate change and those big issues should use the same techniques, right?
Look,
or maybe the government should use the same technique. And I think, well, Ilya and Kira, I mean, because I'm fascinated by the digital transformation of Ukraine, actually. I think it's an amazing business case, Dia.City, all those things. But Ilya, start, and then Kira.
Yeah, I want to highlight, we are not here debating right or wrong, good or bad. We're saying the change has happened. You are spending the 5 hours on your phone. Maybe it's good, maybe bad, it's the future to decide, but apparently the change did happen.
Kira.
So we will probably be talking about it more today. So let's take as an assumption that the government is concentrated on the greater good for all.
Well, that's their job, right?
Yeah.
That's supposed to be their job.
But I'm just saying, let's make this fair assumption. And if so, then using tech and using social media and using everything what's in its hand to move the public opinion towards the main problems is like probably the way to sweeten the pill that will then go with the legislation, when there will be like higher taxes on certain items that are actually taking more resources to produce, which are lowering taxes for example, what was Andrii Dligach saying about additional insect proteins, etc. So this is basically where the government is just taking a long-term idea, long-term plan, and then using its power in public opinions to generate incentives for certain items.
David, you've been really involved in very successful marketing work, but also in politic campaigns. So I think you kind of understand both world. What's your take on that? What should we do to make people change?
There's a saying in Washington, D.C., which is, how does change happen? And the answer is, one funeral at a time. It's a very cynical expression that's usually talked about when judges on the Supreme Court pass away, because they're sitting on life, right? And that's when you can enter, you can insert a new judge, right? But if we zoom out and think about it, I've worked with change communication for half my life, and I think change is really difficult on an individual level and even on an organizational level. Like I'm not sure I can change, but what I'm a very firm believer of is generational change. Generations change and they take quantum leaps, and that is the course of history. We've seen that for every new generation. And when I look at young people today, I am amazed by the talent, the ambition, the drive, and I see two main interests among young women and young men: climate and crypto, respectively. And I think we fail to see that these two are mirrors of the same thing. They're decoupling from old systems. They're decentralizing infrastructure in new ways. So in a 10, 20, 30-year horizon, I'm super optimistic. It's us I'm worried about. How are we gonna survive and thrive through this massive change that is being imposed on us by young people today? Because they also vote and they also buy what they need, right?
Alexei, do you have any comment on that?
Наверное,
I think that I would like to add up a different argument to that, because, you know, there is a theory, that is a theory for the development of corporations and humanity, the spiral dynamics. And it basically states that while the basic needs of people are not covered, it's really hard for people to focus on more abstract things. You know, not tangible things. Maybe these abstract things will have some really good beneficial impact for environment, for the social development, but unless these basic needs are covered, unless there's no problem for access to food, if there is good access to safety, as there is good access, I don't know, to warmth even, then only then people, they have this opportunity for having this mental resources to think about global problems that might seem more abstract for average person to think of. So I think it's very important, if we would like to get new technologies implemented to the social behavior, it is important for us to cover the basic social needs. And I believe that in this case, the government is one of the biggest contributors to that. And I do believe still that in Ukraine, we do not have this, if I can put it this way, governmental propaganda of green technologies, the technologies that will have the long-term positive impact. We don't have it, I don't know, due to the political and business reasons, and I don't know, maybe we're not able to build up this green technology ideology inside of the governments. Well, that's my point of view.
Let's switch to something else, and let's talk about the pandemic. And okay, not necessarily in a bad way or anything, but in what it had changed for us in the way we work. And all of a sudden, a lot of us discovered that we can work from home. It's not necessarily always a good thing. We don't necessarily always like it, but for some of us, it is a good thing. And we discovered that there is a really cool technology called Zoom. And there's even something now called Zoom fatigue, which is an interesting way. Do you think that we've learned that from this pandemic, that there is other ways to work, to collaborate, to create, to do business? And those ways can mean that, well, maybe we can work differently, work from home, work remotely, and do you think it's here to stay? And tech is here to help? Who wants to start? Kira.
I can.
Then David.
There are three aspects of this, and I would like to touch each one. First is when we look up in Google what are the three main breakthrough tech and three main areas of investment for 2021, for basically first active post-COVID year, that would be digital education, the online education, that would be digital workplace, like improved Zooms, so people would fight Zoom fatigue. And the third would be touchless deliverables. So people all over the world, especially in US, they want all their interaction with goods that are coming to them be touchless. So what does this mean for us as generation? This means that basically the post-COVID world lives by the different rules. And we live by the different rules both in the workplace as a country, and we live as individuals by the different rules, where we learn about ourselves new and interesting things. So from the very beginning, even when I was in business leading the company, I was a big opponent of the remote work. I think if you're building the company based on like a great company culture and mutual beliefs and values, it's extremely hard to build that when you have people working from home, working remotely, especially constantly. And I was really against working remotely in any way. And but like, what does it does it mean now? Does it have any influence now? No, because at some point you just had to be ready to switch to this way of working, and generally I think I was wrong in not being able to prepare the company and its structure to this major change. On the other hand, I could tell you I was right, because it turned out that working remotely does influence the company and the culture and the onboarding and creating new ideas and all these things that Andrii Dligach was telling us about, how we can grow and strive and make all those huge progresses. It all goes down because people don't communicate in this material way where all these sparkles in the eyes happen, all these ideas are brought up, all this chit-chat with the coffee where people are thinking to make their own startups happen. And this is what is taken from us. And I truly don't believe that any virtual conferences can bring that back. So now we're expecting that the tech will create ways for us to get back to where we can create and develop all together, but being safe. And the third thing is what COVID transformation did for Ukraine. I truly believe that it was a kick, like a hit that we needed to have as a country to make this digital progress. And I'm not talking only about the government and digital transformation that is happening right now with Ukraine. I'm talking about lots of companies that were telling me, and their owners that were telling me that they are not going to switch to online services. They are not going digitalized because they are not ready to that especially. They didn't have a choice. And now we made this jump just because we had to. And this change that COVID, the new world that COVID pushed us to, is actually good for Ukraine.
To David's point, how many funerals does it take, right? David?
Yeah, shouldn't take that literally. That expression, it deals with, the myth of win-win situations and portrays history as a very violent process and a battle between very different motives and agendas. So, the pandemic and the consequences. First of all, regarding Zoom fatigue. So, I run an audio app called Anyone, and we've done a lot of research in video versus audio, and Zoom fatigue is real because, first of all, our brains are reading into a 2D image as a 3D image, and it is tiring for our brain, the way we're wired, to read 3D as 2D. And secondly, we're just looking at ourselves. Imagine sitting in a meeting and you have a small mirror right here while you're talking to people and you see yourself in the mirror. It's not ideal. I'm a very strong proponent of audio. I believe that's a very intimate and strong way to connect. But look, the pandemic, I subscribe to the point of view that it's been an accelerant, that we were long overdue with changes in the educational system, the workplace, and retail in general, and that we basically were pushed 7-8 years ahead in the future, while also discovering that we have other systems and industries that also need to be revamped. Healthcare, most importantly. So yeah, I don't think it changed much, but it accelerated a lot.
So, like Kira, you believe that it was, Kira believes it's been a huge kick for Ukraine to move ahead, but in fact, you also believe that it's been a huge kick for the world to move ahead as well.
it's been good in terms of revamping broken systems. I think it's been terrible on mental health and intrahuman relations. I think it's made us less tolerant in general. And I think the big danger about the pandemic is that it proves whatever you believe, it's this projection surface for your ideas of how the world works, regardless of what you think. If you think that we need strong institutions to survive, well, the pandemic proves that. If you think we need closed borders and keep people out, well, the pandemic proves that. So that's the real danger of it, reading in too much to it, I think.
Chris, what's your take on that?
So, you know, if you think about sort of motivators of change, and particularly in the technology and the business world, it tends to happen when things shift. And there's lots of different kinds of shifts that occur. There's economic shifts, there's technology shifts, there's sort of social shifts, there's consumer acceptance. You know, I talk a lot about, you know, there was this great company that was founded, brilliant idea back in the 90s in Silicon Valley that was called Webvan. Webvan was going to let you order groceries online and it would be delivered to your house. And they blew through, I don't know, close to $1 billion and shut down. Why? Because the consumers weren't ready for that kind of experience. And so there are all of these different kinds of shifts that expose both technical and business opportunities. If you'd asked me 15 years ago, would millions of people around the world be willing to let strangers stay in their house? I would be like, have you lost your mind, right? That there are these different shifts. The thing about the pandemic is the pandemic caused sort of an earthquake set of shifts all at the same time. That you had this shift in terms of healthcare. You know, I can't go in large groups. If I go in large groups, I'm going to get sick. If I go to the office, I run the risk of getting sick. It caused huge economic disruption in terms of retail that relied on people to actually physically show up at the shop. It changed the psychology. It changed the psychology of people. And I don't think there's any going back from a lot of that. People talk about, oh, we want to go back to normal. I subscribe to there will be new normals. And I think that, for instance, one of the new normals will be, it'll be a hybrid in terms of remote work and in-person work. Because to your point, you know, stuff like Zoom is fantastic. It saved my company from going under. But at the same time, Zoom is terrible for building meaningful personal relationships. The meaningful personal relationships happen in these face-to-face encounters, and it happens with serendipity, as you were talking about, you know, two people having a cup of coffee and they start talking about something and something interesting happens. You know, these virtual technologies don't allow that kind of casual interaction in the same way to occur. And so, you know, I think it'll be 5 years before we really understand the outcome of all of these different, you know, the outcome of all of these different shifts that have happened. But, you know, I do think, coming back to the idea of remote work, it has opened all kinds of possibilities for people to live and work in different places. I myself now am a digital nomad, which would have been unthinkable 5 years ago. But at the same time, I've really come to appreciate the fact that it's events like this and the chance to have that human interaction that lets me build new relationships. And I think companies are going to have to find some kind of new balance between allowing the flexibility of remote work, but at the same time being able to promote the meaningful human interaction that allows creativity and innovation to go forward.
Ilja?
I want to focus on maybe two little bit less discussed aspects of pandemia. So I think it really has put at a stress test two very important areas of say, humankind activity. One is the legal framework. I think it was like a real test, because apparently the governments had to react fast. Now the problem was they couldn't possibly react precisely per the regulations and per the law. So we all, for example, in Lithuania, were faced with challenge where Zoom actually, as is, with its terms of services, was illegal because it was used to teach kids. And apparently transmitting video of kids is a very challenging area. So still we have ongoing debate, all the measures, the business lockdowns, etc. Was it like really legal? Because per the constitution, it's only a very few exceptional cases where you could limit the basic freedoms, the freedom of movement, the freedom to your work, the freedom to your education, etc. So still the aftermath, I think, will last for maybe like a dozen of years, just deciding, okay, is the legal framework is fast, sufficient, effective enough for us to deal with those kind of things? And the answer is not that simple at all, not that simple at all. The other thing is apparently the financial system. Because, well, it looks like both US and EU decided to fund the pandemic for just printing money. So yeah, it's easy for governments, hey, like businesses shut down for a year because you will probably get a little bit less sick, but we have to somehow subsidize the businesses, etc. So basically the growing concern is that by virtue of simply deciding the simplest possible way governments could decide, hey, okay, fine, we will do subsidies, we will do a financial injection, we will, stake debts, and that's it. So the next generations of politicians will have to somehow rule out this side. And if you really do the math, is the economical cost of dealing with the pandemic is really adequate? Couldn't it really be solved in a different way? It's still, again, I don't have an answer. I'm just saying that the way both legal and financial, at least the way governments dealt as a citizen, I have a very, very mixed feeling. So I wish maybe next couple years somebody does maybe a better job actually thinking, deciding, and doing fixes, because these aspects I think haven't really been dealt perfectly, at least as it should be.
Alexei.
На самом деле,
Well, basically, it's hard to add up anything because everything that has been said by my colleagues, I do agree with that, because all of this, a lot of good things have happened because of the pandemic. And, digitalization has happened due to pandemic, and digitalizations of the different services of different economy sectors has happened because of pandemic. And I would call it a positive moment for the pandemic, this acceleration. But more of the companies, many companies and many businesses, they were also heading towards digitalization, but the pandemic has radically accelerated this adaptation and movement process. And a lot of companies have seen, especially our company, we have known that if you will create those remote work processes, this remote collaboration processes in a right way, you will not lose the productivity and the effectiveness of work, but you will be even able to add some additional values to your work. For example, our employees, they have more time for their families now, and that's a positive moment. As well, it can be said, right, that without the physical contact, the constant Zooms and Google Meets, it's tiresome. And of course, that's not all the time they're very effective. So I would agree to that the full digitalization of all of the business processes, whether we speak about the corporate governance, it's impossible right now. The technologies does not give us have this opportunity or to feel this energy flow, to feel presence that we generate when we see each other face to face. But I do believe this is a question of time, because I do believe that maybe not in 5 years, but in 10 years, the technology will give us the opportunity to sense, to feel this energy of presence of one another, even being away from one another. Right now, the pandemic has already stimulated this remote format of different types of collaboration. And I believe that the adequate answer to that, an adequate response to that, would be building some kind of the hybrid model when majority or half of the business processes, half of the working time will be done remotely, but there still will be regular offline communication, offline meetings that will help us to build up this culture, that will help us to have this value exchange, that will help us to preserve some important non-material things existing in the company. Thus, I don't know, as any process, as any technology, there are pros and cons. And I'm sure, I understand that has been a huge damage to economy, but we have seen still lots of sectors of economy growing. We have new digitalization processes launched. So, I believe that, yes, there's a whole amount of pros and cons.
We've been thinking about a lot with building UNIT.City. I mean, should we keep building buildings and offices and everything? I think Ilja has a plane to catch, so bye.
Thank you.
But we will continue, so don't go. Maybe one of the very last thing I want to talk about is trust we have, especially trust we have in tech companies. Because recently, I mean, we see wherever we go, a lot of people saying, well, do I trust Facebook or can we trust Facebook with our data? We see government having more and more issue with monopolies. We see that in the US. We see that in China. Basically, the two tech giants are starting to have issues with government wanting to regulate and saying, well, those people are becoming way too big and maybe a little bit scary for us. Do you think this is a trend, and should we delete Facebook? Should we trust Facebook? Guys, actually, are you going to delete Facebook? I don't know if you saw the movie on social media. I mean, recently it was a bit scary with an amazing guy called Jaron Lanier that I really admire. So what's your take on that? On a personal way, and then maybe on a more global way. On a personal way, do you still trust technology, for example, for social media? Should we? And then on the global way, should government regulate? Who wants to start? David.
What a brilliant question. My data, my individual data, is absolutely worthless. It's only the aggregate of data that is valuable, right? So that is something that helps me sleep at night. Like the idea that no one's after me. But of course, we all need to be worried about how infotech works to understand our drives and behaviors and attitudes, and how that can be tailored to win elections, to sell us things, right? As I said, I'm building an early stage technology company, and we're thinking a lot about data. We've had a team of 12 AI ethicists do an ethical product roadmap for us, where we have asked every single difficult question that we could face in the next 5 years of our existence. And I'm not saying this to show off, how woke we are. I'm saying it because I think that is quickly becoming the new norm, because we're seeing the consequences of not asking those questions up front. You get broken up. That's what's going to happen now in the US. Tech is going to get broken up. And it's actually a win-win situation, because the total value creation coming out of that will be a net positive. So when it comes to data ownership, no, we shouldn't trust anyone with too much power, period. But we should also be excited about new data ownership models that are emerging, that are being made possible thanks to new technology and new values among founders.
Kira.
Because recently I was just looking into the research of how different generations are looking into trusting tech, deleting social media, etc. It basically said that people under 25 have zero problems with sharing all the information, and they see no threat in any social media corporations or any governments doing something with it. They believe that this is the price that we are paying for being close to each other. They are saying, yeah, okay, I'm sharing whatever needs to be shared, and I'm not scared of anything. And I believe this is being like a cycles from people being very close and worrying about what tech could do to their lives, to people being really open and then just waiting for another cycle of threats. Of course, there should be regulations, and of course, we should be talking on a case-by-case basis here. Because when we are talking government versus technology, and we need to actually ask ourselves which government. Is it the China government, or Chinese government, or is it US government, or is it Ukrainian government? And here in Ukraine, we have another problem. We are at war with Russia, who is using all the social media, all the information it could get to have to use all its forces against us and brainwash people and do whatever it takes just to get some support. So in this matter, we should make tough decisions on how we should act to protect the country and protect the people, and what is our relations with social media here and there. And I know these conversations, these happen often and often on how should we, what steps do we need to take, so everybody would be okay with it, knowing that it's an evil step that we need to take to protect the better good.
Chris.
You know, this question of trust is really interesting. I agree with you with the comment that was made earlier about, you know, sort of younger generations not having an issue being able to share, you know, to share lots of data. I do wonder, you know, if they truly understand the risks of all of their identity stuff being shared. You know, but you know that's a different discussion. Where I struggle is I don't necessarily trust the large corporations to do an effective job of protecting the data I've given them. You know, you look at the rise of cybercrime, and you look at the ransomware, and you look at all of these kinds of things. You know, I think that this is going to be an issue, you know, as we look at trends over the next 5 years. I think that we're going to have a real reckoning around cybersecurity, and what are the penalties for people who fail to take adequate precautions to protect information, but also what are the penalties, and how do we go after the people, you know, how do we go after the people that are perpetrating the cybercrime? And I think, you know, yes, personal data protection and so forth is really important, but there's a much broader systemic question that's at play here in terms of risk to infrastructure. You know, a hospital in the United States had all of their computers locked in the middle of a pandemic in a ransomware attack. I mean, I think that, you know, this trust question, and I think it is actually that big tech and the governments are going to have to find a way to partner together to counter this.
I have a question to exaggerate. Can we really trust anyone with our data? Like either big corporation or any government?
I mean, in the purest sense, no. I mean, but, you know, this is where, you know, one of the things, you know, that I do like about it's you know, makes implementation difficult, but the new European, you know, data protection regulations at least are sort of getting people to start to think about, what do I want done with my, you know, what do I want done with the data? A good friend of mine is a futurist, works a lot in AR, VR, Amy Peck. And Amy thinks that where all of this ends up is actually all of our data is secured on the blockchain, and we get to monetize our data. If someone wants to market to me, I can set a price that says, if you want my demographic data, that's fine. You can have my demographic data, but you need to actually pay. You need to actually pay me. I think there's a whole lot of paradigm shifts that will happen over the next 4 to 5 years.
Alexei.
I believe, well, I fully agree to this point of view that, that the younger generation, the younger generation treats data in a different way. I do believe that the younger generation, they believe that the data they share with different kind of corporation, there is a certain price for the service you receive, a certain price you pay for the personalized, tailored service that brings you better values. And I do believe that without this kind of data sharing, those services will not be possible. And you will not be possible to have this level of personalization of services that we currently have. So, of course, this is something that is going to happen in the framework of that technological progress that we're currently going through. And of course, that will happen due to those demands that we have for the technology progress. But we know that we're going to have those edge cases when the totalitarian states are going to be and will be using the data for some certain pressure to pressure the voters that disagree with their main point of view. So I don't actually have the answer to this question. I don't know how we can avoid those cases from happening. But at the same time, I would like to say that again, that, data sharing is a compulsory condition for the technological process to be developed and to be more personalized. So I do believe that the global trend is following the very side, but maybe that will be frightening at this very point, and a lot of people will not support my point of view. But I do believe that the world is now becoming really transparent. Yes, we're not there yet, but in 10, 20, 30 years, we will not have this understanding that I'm taking care about my personal data, because there will be nothing to hide. Everyone will know everything about everyone. So we will, I believe that that's my point of view, that we will have no need and we will have no fear that my data can be violated or interpreted in any kind of malicious way. Of course, there will be different edge cases that will provoke additional discussions, scandals, and questions of whether everything what's happening is okay. But I do believe that the global trend is getting closer to the world becoming totally transparent.
Now, very last thing, and you have one very short answer. Are you optimist or pessimist? Kira.
I'm an optimist. I believe there is lots of amazing things in front of us, with all the challenges that will turn out to be then the kicks and the changes that we will be facing with an open eyes.
Chris.
I'm optimistic, and the reason is there are around the world, here in Ukraine, all over the world, there are incredibly smart, innovative, creative, driven people. And if we can find ways collectively and individually to get as many people involved as possible in the innovation process and creating new technology and new approaches and new ways of doing things, we have sufficient brain power to solve all of these big problems. We just need to get people focused and organized and working on coming up with those applications.
David.
When I build teams, I make sure I have both optimists and pessimists at the table. So I always respect the pessimists. They're burning so much more energy and carbs than the rest of us. So I tip my hat to the pessimists. I choose to be an optimist. It's
good. Alexei.
Yeah.
I'm totally optimistic. I'm observing how the technology are changing the world right now, and I believe they're changing the world for better. And I believe that the people, they now have the access to those goods that have never been achievable for them. And that's about me, my friends, my relatives. That's what I see all around me. So, but what is most important for me, I always use this motto as constantly developing myself, and the technologies help me to accelerate myself in this development. They give me the access to information. They give me the access to the world. They make me closer to the world, and they're helping me to meet interesting people, and that's great.
I think we will remember that on an early Saturday, very freezy morning, we ended up in a kind of a good note. We still believe in tech to save the world. Thank you very much. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Спасибо.